you're gonna run into shanks if the ball's launching down that target line and the club head and hands are working too far to the right. So I've got the weight in the balls of my feet, I'm missing the bucket. As my weight's working in towards my left heel, I wanna feel my hands working up and left more than normal. If I overdid that, I would lessen the odds of the shank. So the weight in my feet, I'm feeling the pressure to my heel, hands up and left. And that would be a surefire no shank drill. Hey guys, Eric here out at the Bethlehem Golf Club. In today's video, we're gonna show you how to stop shanking the ball in 5 minutes or less. Before we dive in, a quick word from today's video sponsor. I want to talk to you today about Live View Golf. Now you guys hear me say all the time that you need feedback when you're practicing. You need to know if you're actually doing what you're trying to do, and the best way to give yourself feedback ultimately is video. And not only is video the best way to give yourself feedback, but being able to see yourself simultaneously as you're doing a movement is the best form of video feedback. It's the best way I've seen to make changes in your swing and be able to correlate the differences between your feels and your reels. Live View is super easy to use and set up. Simply set it up behind or in front of you. You connect it with your iPad or phone, pop that on the ground. You can actually do your practice, see yourself as you're doing it, the best way to expedite your process. I encourage you guys to check out Live View Golf. We'll put a link in the description down below with a coupon code. Okay, so in today's video, we're talking about how to stop the dreaded shank. Now there's 3 things that I see typically when I'm working with someone that could lead to a shank. This is actually inspired by one of our members at CogornoGolf.com. He was shanking it. These were the 3 things in his swing that I see a lot that we talked about. Now when we're talking about a shank, when I come down during the downswing, it can happen in a couple different ways, but generally you shank the ball by hitting it off of the heel, even in towards the hosel. So I'll give you a close-up of this. With the irons, we have this little round hosel part. When you hit a shank, almost always the club is hitting this round hosel part. This is why you get these on irons much more than drivers, right? Because they don't have this as much. So round ball, round little hosel, the ball squirts off to the right. Okay, that's normally what we're doing. Sometimes I've seen toe shanks, but generally off of the heel. So there's 3 things that could cause that. And kind of the first concept I'd want you to think about when you're hitting shanks is imagine there's a wall between the golf ball and the target. Let's say this is my target line, and this little stick back here is a wall. Now when I swing the club, this club should never go outside of the wall. It's not outside the wall when I start, and we'll put some visuals up here so you can see the club head movement. It should work slowly up and inside of the wall on the way back, slowly down towards the ball. And this is the club head I'm talking about. It works to the ball from inside the wall, boom, and then it works back in on the way through, and we'll get to that part. But concept number 1 when you're hitting a shank is never get the club head outside the wall. You can see when I do that, if I set the ball up in the middle of the club and I push it out, that gets the ball on the hosel. Never get outside the wall. And that leads us to the drill I did with this gentleman that I would do if I were you, and I always do if I'm someone who hits it on the heel or the hosel. Now, normally I suggest using like a box, like a club box, a shoe box. I don't have one of those. I do got this wooden block. Now this might be a bit intense for some of you guys, but I want to put it there for visual, and I'll show you a different option. So drill number 1 before we get to the 3 root causes, always put an object outside the ball. If I take my setup, that's effectively the wall that I was talking about. The club should never run into this wooden block or box, okay? It should work up and in, down and out, and then back up and in. So this would be a beautiful way to start, even if I just hit 1 or 2 with this here for you to show you. And when I set this up, I like to put it maybe an inch inside the wall. So maybe 2 fingers, 2 finger widths would be a good place to start. I've got an 8-iron here, and I'm just, for the sake of hitting one, gonna just punch one out 100 yards. And this would be where I'd start with someone who's got a shank before we get into the root stuff. Say, hey, can I hit the ball and have that club head work on a circle around me on both sides without getting outside of it? If you did nothing else and trained yourself with just this in, this would be a humongous first step. Now, that wooden block might intimidate you. Maybe you don't have one. And so we can just use a range bucket. Most all of us will have something similar to this. I can place the range bucket just outside of the golf ball in a similar fashion, where I've got about, the same 2 fingers from the toe to the bucket. And this might be scary for you if you're not used to this, but same sort of thing, 8-iron, just a little half one, swinging the club head on a circle around my body, finding the center of the face. Now, for some people, it'll be that easy. For other people, it's not going to quite be that easy, because there are some things that could be causing problems. The first thing of the 3 that I promised would be the weight in the feet. Someone who shanks the ball, gets the club head outside that ball target line. Let's put this back here just for reference. Notice as my weight gets more towards my toes, the club head is going to push outside that target line. So here's my weight where I want it to be when I start. It's kind of balls of the feet. Anytime my weight goes towards my toes, the club head goes forward. You can see how that motion there would get the club head outside the wall and would promote the shank shot. Now, some players set up with the weight too far forward to start with and just stay too far forward. What I'm saying is most people who hit a shank move too far towards the toes on the way down. And a lot of those players move towards the toes because they start too far on the heels. And so at least half the time someone hits a shank and I see their setup, the weight is too far back on the heels with the butt too far back to start with. Your brain then counteracts that by moving too far towards the toes during the downswing, and then boom, our shank shots. So the simple version, when we've got this bucket in, is to make sure your weight's working towards your heels in the backswing, or downswing rather. In particular, more towards your left heel sooner. So assuming you're the player who works too far forward this way, maybe even heels up off the ground, club head outside the wall, as you're missing the bucket, you want to feel the weight moving towards your left heel, likely more and sooner than normal. And there again, I want to reduce or take out all the things that would potentially kick that club head outside the wall. Weight in the heels. Now, in fact, if I set up with my weight on the heels, I'm going to have to do some work on that. We'll put a picture on the screen of a player here with the butt of the club. If I put my back of my armpits over the balls of the feet, this is where I'm looking to set up, just to give you a visual. Pressure should be on the balls of my feet. That's kind of where my shoelaces end. So I want to start in the middle of the balls of my feet, and then during my downswing, I want to work back into that left heel. Start on the balls of the feet, which might be a little, you might feel a little weird. You're like, hey, I'm already going towards my toes. You're telling me to start on my toes. Yes, because your brain's always going to do the opposites. Start on your toes a little bit more, balls of the feet, move back towards the heel. So I got the bucket in, my weight's on the outside of my shoelaces, making sure my distance away from the ball is appropriate. I'm going back towards my left heel. And none of those anywhere near the heel. Now, that would be part number 1, weight in the feet. Part number 2, I'd call sweet spot movement. Sweet spot movement, which means I see players get the club head, which could go in 2 different fashions, but I said that club head should work in a circle, right? It works up and in, down and out towards the ball, and then back up and in. But a lot of times I see players who don't get that down and out towards the ball correct, just gently getting closer to that wall as I hit. Sometimes that's too far underneath to the right, and sometimes, in fact, that can be too far out too early. In either way, the beautiful part is that wooden block, that cardboard box. This will solve that. This is really what the point of that is. I just wanted to put it in the beginning. If I can hit balls without missing the bucket, I know I didn't over-exaggerate my sweet spot delivery too much, which really means as I work into the ball, I want the club head to approach the ball on about this angle. See, it's just gently working in, and we'll again give you some visuals here so you can see that. The club head's just inside my hands and then towards the ball. I'm not overdoing any of my swing path pieces. This would be piece number 2. The simple version for this is just you missing the bucket, right? You shouldn't have to think too much other than, hey, can I accomplish this missing the bucket? The weight's in the balls of my feet. I'm gonna move back towards my heel. I'm just looking to get my sweet spot movement beautiful. That's a really good path drill. The third thing that can get it too far outside is the follow through. And just to kind of clarify the sweet spot movement, think of this wall again. If my sweet spot movement is off, my club path, I never want to go outside the wall, to the ball or past the ball. So if my sweet spot movement's too far over the top, I'm outside the wall early, that can be shank. If my sweet spot's too far inside, I'm outside the wall over this way, also shank. Anytime the club goes outside the wall, shank comes into play. Sweet spot movement, miss the bucket. Lastly is the follow through, okay? And so usually when I see shanks, again, the premise is the club head's to the right of the wall, would be players who have the club head typically moving too far down, but especially too far out, too long. Now, some players I might have drill this in the beginning if they're wildly over this way. But a lot of other players will go too far down and too far out. And so in the follow through, if you're hitting shanks, we want to make sure the club head stays inside the wall. And we do that by having the hand path work more up and left. So you'll see some of these visuals. The hands reach their lowest point by about the right thigh. From that point forward, from face on, they're actually working up. And from down the line, they're working left. And that brings that club head in towards the ball gradually. And then it works to the left. Notice some of these pictures we're showing you in the visuals. The ball's launching down this target line while the club head and hands are working left. You're going to run into shanks if the ball's launching down that target line and the club head and hands are working too far to the right. So I've got the weight in the balls of my feet. I'm missing the bucket. As my weight's working in towards my left heel, I want to feel my hands working up and left more than normal. If I overdid that, I would lessen the odds of the shank. So the weight in my feet, I'm feeling the pressure to my heel, hands up and left. And that would be a surefire no shank drill. Now, assuming you don't have any like wild off setup pieces, like if you're just in there standing so freaking close to the ball, you gotta adjust some of that stuff. But weight on the balls of the feet to start, 2 inches outside the toe with the bucket, back into the heel. Once my hands get here, I'm ripping them up and left. My arms and hands feel like they're going way up and left of my shoulder. Kind of more left the better to start with. And not only is that a really good shank drill, frankly, this is a really good path drill for a lot of things. So those are the 3 things I saw with the gentleman. Those are the 3 things I see all the time. Weight in the feet, sweet spot delivery, and then the follow through. Imagine this wall, never get your club outside of it. If you were to do, let's say you had shanks and we were working together on CogornoGolf.com, I would put that wall in and say, hey, 20 to 30 reps, no less than 3 days a week, as close to daily as you can, with this station in. I would start with an 8-iron and be able to do it at about half to 3/4 length shots. Once that gets easy, go a little longer, a little faster, a little longer, a little faster. And then slowly we would take that drill out. But if you're hitting shanks, you watch this video that maybe took 15 minutes, but you practice it, you should stop hitting off the heel immediately, certainly within 5 minutes if you're doing it exaggerated enough. If you're still shanking or you have other problems, go to CogornoGolf.com, send us your videos, let's work together, build you a plan to improve. We'll put that card on the screen. We'll also put a similar shank video. You can check that out now.